Hey, welcome to Janktown. Will here, bringing you guys a deck tech primer on the Outlaws of Thunder Junction version of Rakdos the Muscle. Spoiler season's been looking really good. I'm pretty hyped for this set actually. However, I will be taking a short break towards the end of the month from making videos because I'm getting married! Yep, with wedding planning ramping up and all this, it's been pretty hard to find time to make deck tech videos. However, when things do get a bit more stable, I will be back to serve you guys some more primers, analysis, and all that good stuff. Anyway, enough of the personal stuff. Let's get into Commander analysis. When building out a deck, one of the first things I do is figure out what is the role of our commander, and Rakdos reads like a build around. This means our game plan revolves around being able to make the most out of Rakdos' abilities. Now, aside from being a big flample threat, he does have two extremely useful abilities. One's an activated one that allows him to protect himself, and the other is a triggered ability, and it really is what makes the deck. It allows us to impulse draw, and most notably, it doesn't have a once per turn clause, so the impulse draw always triggers. That said, it's no surprise that the focus of our deck is on making sacrifices. Now, black and red is the color most known for sacrifices, so this is a pretty well supported archetype. However, a nice nuance about Rakdos the Muscle is that he cares about the mana value of creatures we're sacrificing. This means we're not just creating a bunch of tokens and then just sacrificing them for value. We're actually going to need to work a little bit to be able to get some good value out of it. Now, exiling cards off the top and playing them, aka impulse draw, is already a proven powerful mechanic. However, to take advantage of the exiled cards, we're gonna need mana. And so this is gonna be a mana hungry deck. I'm talking treasures, rituals, all of which is well supported in this slice of the color pie. However, unlike most decks, we're not racing out to fast starts. So I know ramp is usually used as like an accelerant to try to get us into like the mid game quicker. However, the ideal start for us is to be able to set up, not die, and then use our accelerants to unlock a big turn. Now remember, if we sacrifice creatures during our opponent's turn, we actually get access to all of those cards until our upcoming end step. So it's important to set up first. Because while the typical ideal build around commanders are ones that can like come down early, I actually find that Rakdos' 5 mana value is pretty much like a sweet spot. We don't need to get distracted of like trying to play him out as quickly as we can, but instead we want to play a few creatures first, play him on turn 5 maybe, where then he can eat some of the creatures to then protect himself. That'll trigger his ability, and then we can just get that whole value train going. But the question is though, when do we exile from our own library versus when do we exile from our opponent's libraries? Now, I've yet to pilot him, but I would think that as a general rule of thumb, I'd be milling ourselves as a means to dig out an engine. Now, impulse draw is useful, and just even having one shot at it can turn the whole game around. However, being able to keep going is really what'll snowball us into a win. Because we're looking for sack outlets, we're looking for sack fodder, we're looking for recursion, stuff that'll make our sacrifices more than just a one-shot. However, if we already have that in hand, or maybe we're just not hurting for fuel, then it's probably correct to target our opponents for value. We can play lands off of Rakdos, which means we likely won't be missing any land drops in the near future. We can play ramp, removal, we can play their own threats. And as a quirk, while I'm not typically a combo player, I did put a combo line in here so that we can go infinite while not being totally dead cards if we don't draw the other pieces. These 7 different themes of our deck comprise of our usuals of ramp, removal, and draw, and I'll go over those card choices first, but then I'll get into our other themes of sacrificials, outlets, recursion, and something we like to call UBP, or utilities, bombs, and pets. Up first is ramp, and we're not looking to burst out the gates. However, Soul Ring and Arcane Signet, just staples we'd still want to run. Now beyond these, Soldevi Adnate and Illuminar Ceres are a pair of sack outlets that essentially give us a ritual based on the mana value of the creature that we sacrifice. Burnt Offering sacrifice, just one-shot versions of these effects. Now these are great for giving us access to big turns, particularly for when Rakdos is out on the battlefield. Now for outright rituals, we are running both Dark Ritual and Mana Geyser, and they fulfill different roles. Like, I wouldn't mind burning a Dark Ritual early, but the Geyser is really for those big turns. Either way, both are generally really great to hit off of Rakdos' ability. Now, outside of rituals, Burnished Heart and Solemn Simulacrum, pair of creatures that can get us lands, and nobody touches lands in Commander, and Pawn of Ulamog and Pitiless Plunderer are just ways to generate mana from our sacrifices. Black Market's a card that I've seen overperform in terms of like how much mana it can generate over the course of a game, especially in decks that like want things dying. And Horizon Stone is a card that I'm just curious to try out, as an alternative. While we're setting up, we can essentially bank mana, and Rakdos doesn't really care about what color we use, so this should be able to work even for the colored pips in the stolen cards that we're getting, unless I'm missing something. Last couple of ramped are a pair of artifacts, Ashnod's Altar, just a powerful enabler, especially in sacrifice decks, and Helm of Awakening. I think it works great in this deck. I mean, sure, it helps our opponents, but I think this outperforms medallions, and it's just really great when we want to chain multiple spells in one turn. We need to stay alive while we set up, and removal buys us the time that we need. Shriekmon and Gachu are just a pair of spot removal creatures that sacrifice themselves with Evoke, and DFB and Volcanic Torrents are one-sided wipes that take advantage of our deck casting things from exile. Now, Hurl Through Hell is a flavor choice here. I just want an excuse to use this card. It's a little steep at 4 mana, but we are playing a demon, and so we can hurl a creature to hell and then recast it from exile. Outside of gimmicks though, Chaos Warp, flexible removal, Blasphemous Act, just an efficient wipe. And lastly, one of my favorite cards to play, Living Death. This is practically like in my signature spell book, if I had one. Cast Living Death, hold priority, sack all your creatures, and then just cry when it gets countered. Yes, that's how you play it. For draw, we're running a modest amount since we're really banking on Rakdos' Impulse Draw. Village Rites and Deadly Dispute, just cheap ways to sack a creature and it just smoothens out our draws. While Plumb the Forbidden and Disciple of Bolas are burst draw spells that are also sacrifice based. We also want some consistent sources of card draw though, so we're running a new card in Laughing Jasper Flint. Now, how many Outlaws make this guy worth it? At 3 mana value, I think just having him alone is enough. If you have Rakdos out or you steal other creatures, I think that's all upside. Then there's Morbid Opportunist, who can draw us up to 4 cards in one turn cycle. And finally, Garna, which is just a draw engine as well as a finisher. Sack-based or death-based draw engines are usually at 3 mana value, but that flexibility to be able to close out games are why I'm okay to pay the premium of 1 extra mana for Garna. Now, we've talked about sacrificing a whole bunch. What are these sacrificial lambs? Atsushi, Junji, Vindictive Lich, and Wormcoil all have powerful death triggers while also having decent mana value so that we can really dig with Rakdos' ability. Elturel Survivors and Dalek Squadron are a pair of creatures with Myriad, and Myriad makes token copies of these creatures, right? And notably, tokens that are copies of creatures also copy their mana value. So if we have instant speed sack outlets, we can sacrifice the token copies after damage is dealt but before combat ends to be able to dig a whole bunch of cards with Rakdos. Blade of Selves is an equipment that gives Myriad to any creature, and if we Legend Rule ourselves, we still get the Enters and Dice triggers, although they don't stick around long enough to be able to be sacrificed. Then there's Ucholon. Fun card to say, and also creates a copy of itself on our end step, meaning this thing can multiply quickly and get us multiple 4 mana value creatures to sacrifice. Last on the list is Nether Trader, just a good creature to munch on, and it can bring itself back for 1 mana. With our sacrificials lined up, we gotta sack them to something. Classics here are Visraseer, Woe Strider, and another one of my favorite creatures of all time, Yahenni Undying Partisan. The indestructible of Yahenni can sometimes matter here. Outside of creatures though, there's Goblin Bombardment and Spawning Pit as just free sack outlets, and technically a creature but doesn't play like one is Greater Gargadon. Suspend it for 1 and then just use it as a free sack outlet that just can't be interacted with. For the last 4 cards, we're going a different route in Jaxus and Arthian. Now we're creating copies of creatures here, meaning we're again copying their mana value, and plus these tokens sacrifice themselves. Felden makes copies as well, but this time from among creatures in our graveyard, and it also sacrifices itself. And Calamity is a new creature that I want to try out in this deck because it creates 2 copies of whatever saddled it. Now it can only copy non-legendary creatures, the horse has to attack, and it is 6 mana value, so I'm not yet super convinced, but I think it's worth giving it a shot. Up next is Recursion, which gives the deck its resilience and its ability to snowball. Apprentice Necromancer is a creature that sacrifices itself to bring a creature back that will also sacrifice itself, while Prowling Geistcatcher is like a creature that stores the creatures we've sacrificed and it lets us reanimate them all in one go. Wake the Dead and Lich Knight's Conquest are a pair of mass reanimation spells, while Ruthless Technomancer and Chainer and Vat of Rebirth are repeatable ways to get creatures back, each with their own specific hoops to jump through. And finally, there's Nim Death Mantle. Pay 4 mana to be able to save something, allowing it to be sacrificed again, and with Ashnod's Altar, this goes infinite with a Wormcoil. UVP time! Now, we are bringing another card that also goes infinite with the Death Mantle, and it's Grave Titan. Aside from having infinite zombies, we also get infinite sacrifices with this, and thus enabling our other win con, which is milling our opponents out with Rakdos' ability. As payoffs though, Mayhem Devil's a finisher in this deck, and it's pretty much the only damage-based pinger that we have, and Nalfeshni lets us copy cards that we cast from exile. Ayara, just a great utility card that can be a sack outlet, a finisher, or a recursion engine. Finally, we're playing Rakdos, so we're running his charm. It's got responsible graveyard hate on it, picks off an artifact, and it can be a finisher when we're up against decks that have raced out to a fast start and have just gone too wide for us to handle. That's it for this episode. Hope you guys enjoyed that video, and if you found it useful, I hope you could leave a like, share, and subscribe. Those things really help the channel out, and right now is the only way to show some support to the channel. Again, I will be taking a break towards the end of the month. Maybe I'll have like 1 or 2 more deck tech videos until then. I'm excited to get married though, like not gonna lie, it's like new chapter, Planeswalker spark igniting, you know, all that stuff. Anyway, stay inspired, friends, and I'll see you soon.